because I got it. We actually after a year, it took a year to get it, but we got an Apple Mini Mac,
Oh,
and
wow.
it has a there's a software available called Ecamm, and it's
Yep.
really good. Yeah, so it's kind of like an
Well,
OBS and a video production software all in one. Yeah, so
wow.
let's see. We got we're only 25 seconds into it. Huh. Okay, we got one person in.
Okay, cool.
They're coming. Okay, they're coming now.
Yeah. You can hear me all right? Because I
Yeah,
got
let
it.
me tag you real quick while we're waiting. Let
Okay.
me just
Okay.
and just know that we're live. So
Yep. Yep. No worries.
even though people are still coming on, anything that you know this, you're an attorney. Anything you say can will be held against you.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Why aren't you coming up? Let me tag you. Boom,
Geraldine.
boom. There you are. Boom.
Cool.
Okay, so you're tagged now. Yeah. Okay, you're good. So
Okay.
let's go back here. Yeah, we got 22 people in the house. Okay, we can get started. So we were just talking about showing up on broadcast discombobulated. I've never
Yeah,
seen,
just
and I'm laughing because I've never seen you like this before.
I don't know what to say. I've been thinking about what do I say to Todd. I haven't. I've been watching your shows for years now, but last little while not so often. And then I caught one, I think yesterday with this lady from Portugal who was amazing.
Oh, wow. Wasn't that amazing?
Yeah, and I'm watching it and thinking, I just I don't know if I could contribute. The way she was just so clear and on so many levels, contributing with the work she was doing, with how she knew where she was and how it was all unfolding for her. And I'm thinking, I would come on your show, but the last time I came on your show, I was a bit like that, a bit more kind of really fully aware of where I was. And now I just don't know. I don't know what I'm this whole program of what you're supposed to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just showing waking up every day and you know doing my work and enjoying it. And I think maybe that's it. That's all
Well,
I'm supposed to do.
you mentioned something about February a minute ago.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been such a year. I the biggest change in my life. All right, so before February, January actually, I got a little dog. And that was a massive change for me because I've been individual, independent, single, whatever, just looking out for myself and myself alone. And then I got this dog and it all changed. And it grounded me. Like, I think there's nothing more grounding than I don't have children, but I imagine having children has a similar aspect. There's nothing more grounding than being connected to a dependent human being or dependent being, right? Like you have to show up for him. Um, and so he was grounding me right through January, February, and then February particularly. There was this phase where it was I've been waiting on a lot of things, and then they all kind of happened. Just basic things like I was trying to get stuff done around the house, and then tradespeople would call and say, "We just had this opening, tomorrow, and it wasn't going to happen for weeks, but we're going to be in your neighborhood tomorrow. We can come and do this." So it happened twice in one week, and so it suddenly felt like things got a little bit unstuck.
Mm,
And there was this rush of activity, and I felt another big rush of like I'm in the right place, I'm doing the right thing, but it was more like just stuff happening, but no direction, if you like
right.
and I'm used to my big thing has been purpose. I'm used to purpose and direction and goals, and it's more like it's just action and activity, but there's no clear direction. I'm really not making myself clear.
Here you are. Well, that's part of the whole vulnerability and transparency thing. People talked about vulnerability for a long time, and I finally, for myself, I realized, oh, wait a minute, this isn't about vulnerability. That's just the step towards transparency, which makes sense if we're headed towards full blown telepathy. And then the thing that you said about the tradesman, there's something about the spontaneity that I've been aware of since I got involved in this 10 years ago, like the power of it. Something about doing a live, not doing a second take, not editing, not, I just had lunch with a sister. We're planning the Soulogy Fest, the second Soulogy Fest here in Arkansas. And yeah, she was, God, I just lost my train of thought. And this is part of it too. Oh, God, it was related to whatever we were talking about. But
The
anyway,
tradespeople showing up,
I know.
the spontaneity.
So it was, oh, yeah, it was, the spontaneity thing. And she's, in her profession, she's it's very regulated, very, but it's like oh, I know what it was. So it's like when I sat down with her, all of a sudden, all this stuff started coming in. Like sometimes it happens on these shows, actually, every time now. It's very multidimensional. So you'll be getting a download where you're talking to this person, and then you're like picking up some type of nonverbal or sometimes verbal telepathy from the soul to soul, and then information's coming in. So like with the workers, I started to realize, with that example, that spontaneity seems like a very temporary thing. Like it's a moment.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened. Oh, this just happened. But I'm starting to feel that the spontaneity is a permanent thing, and I think that's
Yes.
what I'm getting from you. It's like things just kind of happen, and you just go, but it's actually going to be this way all the time. So
Yeah.
the scheduling and the structuring and the goals and all that just kind of goes away, right?
Totally. And it's a funny mix though, because it's at the same time, and I was talking about being more grounded or being more here. Um, and that seems to be part of the ride for me personally. It's that I spent a lot of last year, um, probably I would put it this way, connecting with higher self. And this year it's more like, okay, well, I need to be here. I need to be connecting to my dog, connecting. We, he, we live a minute from the beach. So every morning it's out to the beach to go for a walk, you know, experience it. I used to go running, and you don't really experience nature when you can do, but I didn't really. I was more like in my own head when I ran. But you walk along the beach with a dog, you're fully embracing what's happening around you, focusing on the little thing and focusing on the sea and the surf and the sun. And so at the same time as all of that spontaneity is happening, it's about, just living.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds so basic and so it must be so obvious to some people watching this. They're just kind of going, "Yeah, that's pretty obvious." But to me,
I
it was
don't.
a
I don't think so.
revelation.
I don't think so because and I've been feeling this for years, which is the biggest challenge is going to be getting used to our natural nature. And the thing about animals and babies, how
Yeah,
they operate off of intuition, or you could call it feeling, and they're very present. And I think that's something they're like showing us. And again, like you said, it's like, oh, I feel kind of silly, but um, it's always been there. In other words, and they're showing us it's always been there, right?
yeah, and it's totally authentic. Now, I had a couple of things happening. Yesterday, I had a long meeting, and tonight I've got a function. So I've dropped him off at a kennel, right? And so for the first time in a few months, 3 months, we're not together. And I got to tell you, Todd, like I was a wreck when I left him,
Oh
dropped him
wow.
off, because we're so connected in such a short time. Um, so I miss him, and so otherwise he'd be running around here, and just you'd be hearing him express himself. the point I was trying to make is that they're so authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just no pretense,
Mm-hmm.
and their first sense with people is to smell, which is totally about energy, and you can't mask it if you're a human being approaching a dog, and they don't mask how they feel. They don't like you. They don't like you,
That's right.
and I. And it's been for me just so wonderful to witness that and to get in touch with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I helped raise 6 kids, and
Yeah.
but when the babies, when 5 of them since they were babies, and it's the same with the babies, right? Like I have one daughter that's a very old soul, and even when she was 2, 3 months old, her face spoke to you, like her expressions, and if somebody, there was a certain relative that would walk in the room and she would just freak out. And this relative had some dark energy, I mean, it wasn't,
Mm.
but because the relative was pretentious, and I don't know, I mean, what the right words are, but that's what you're talking about. Like it's the same with the animals. They like you said, they like you or they don't like you, and it's really they sense what they are, which is
Yeah.
authentic and transparent, and there's no BS. It doesn't matter what you say. You can say to a dog, "Come here, puppy, puppy," and it's like, no. Mm-mm.
Exactly. Plus, they don't care. They don't care, if you're the president of the United States or you're on the streets or whatever, right? That's the unconditional love part. That's so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. So I was reflecting on this. Like I think the difference probably between dogs, cats, pets, and children and babies is it's obviously different species, and I the thing that's been occurring to me with this little dog is the part of the opening up of people that has happened over the last couple of years with COVID. There's been there have been so many people who've gone out and adopted or acquired pets, and it's opening up another channel of love and compassion for the planet and love and compassion for other beings. It's quite beautiful to see. And I'm just wondering whether there's a kind of connection between um, how responsible we feel. I'm going to relate it to dogs because I don't have cats. I've never had cats. So I'll relate it to dogs more. How responsible we feel for dogs to how um, say beings of a higher consciousness might feel towards us.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have, you can treat animals terribly, just like someone of a being who's more advanced than us in consciousness could treat us just like cattle and not care about our feelings and not care about our fears, or nurture us and have concern for us and want the best for us, etc., etc. Even if we might not be able to understand them in because they're of a higher consciousness. I mean, dogs are a little bit different because they're in, as we were just saying, they do have senses that we don't have. But just in terms of their self-awareness or being able to communicate, there's a barrier with human beings, but yet love obviously crosses that barrier. Yet if you get someone who really cares for an animal, then they will they want to make sure the animal isn't hurt. So I'm just wondering whether there's kind of a lesson for humanity. We're growing with this whole awakening and ascension. There's a lesson in with dogs, say, in you know, preparing us to look after another species.
Well, and it's like an inverse too. I never thought about this. What you just said, like I want, if you look at the relationship between us and let's say dogs and dogs, cats are a little bit. Cats are like feminine. They're just like unknown quantity, right? But and then the higher aspects in relation to us. Morgan has this thing. She used to tell me, when you see a puppy, what do you do? And I say, well, I run to the puppy. And what does the puppy do? It runs off, right?
Yeah,
But what?
yeah,
But if you wait, if you just wait there, then the puppy will come to you, right? So if I think
Yeah.
about that, and even my own personal experiences and the things that go in my head as I approach these interactions, which so much of these interactions anyway are invisible. Let's just say it that way. Because I go, oh, wait a minute, don't show me too much of you, like don't get too close to me, and
Yeah, no, kind of
it's
rushed.
almost like because they don't come in until you're ready, right? It's like us the pup being the puppy walking
Yeah,
to
yeah,
them,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah,
another thing Morgan says, because people sometimes will talk about, well, what if something comes in and they don't have good intentions, and she'll say, well, I've never had that situation, and I haven't really had that situation, but is that puppy, that's the puppy walking towards that higher aspect. It's an opening, even though we don't physically take those steps. So it's almost like they know, or they allow it versus, at our own pace, which you hear that a lot
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's so much to learn, and so I don't know how that connects in with the last time we were on. I was talking a lot about law and new ways of practicing law. So I'm not quite sure if there's any. Everything is connected, but I'm not sure if there's any obvious connection to it. It's probably more. If there is any connection to it, it's probably more that you know my life now is about
Mm-hmm.
settling into a way of living, settling into a way of practicing my particular chosen field, which is the law. Um, Not so much trying to, probably when I spoke to you, I think it was last May or June, not so much trying to see where my ability to influence things is. It's more about just the spontaneity, just bringing it
Right.
in, enjoying myself, enjoying the fact that I have this little dog, enjoying the fact that I can go for walks, learning to manifest what I need, working with clients who are doing great things themselves. It's just shaping the life without thinking about big picture all the time, without thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to what speech should I give, what presentation should I give, what should I say next about the way the world is going to be legally in the year 2050.
Right. Right.
None of that. It's just a lot of that is my own programming as well that has had to come undone.
Well, I was going to actually ask you about this. What a segue.
Mm,
Because
mm,
I remember talking to you, which really got me to thinking. It was thought provoking because you came on and you said, everyone's talking about going into 5D and kind of like almost like leaving 3D behind, right? And you were saying in relation to your work how you actually consciously were going into the workplace to bring 5D into the 3D. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool because that's like at the gut level, like at the boots on the ground level. But that's that's I think what you're talking about, because the reason I was going to bring it up is because we get these conceptions in our head. We all get our information or whatever it may be, however we get it, and then we go, okay, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to go do this. And I was thinking about you when I was thinking about talking to you. I thought, I wonder if that's changed, because I know it's changed for me, and I've seen it change for a lot of people. And the only way I can explain it, and I'm grasping at straws here, is kind of like what you're talking about. It's to say, well, you just show up and see what happens. That kind of doesn't say it all, but that's closer to what seems to be where we're at now versus where we were. And I don't know if that's
yeah.
happened to you. Are you still going to work, with the same mindset, or has it altered? Has it modified? Like you're talking about now, I'm more present, and has that transferred into your work as well?
Yeah, I think you've actually captured it beautifully when you say you just show up
Hmm.
and see what unfolds. So that definitely applies to the transformation of 3D. Um, there's there are so many there's so much going on in the 3D world right now. It's just like it's just like just a washing machine, right? It just stuff is chopping around, and there's dirty water, and there's dirty clothes, and some of it's getting clean, and some of it's not. It's just a complete mess. So there's no planning our way out of it.
I know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. And then there's this, and I've been picking up on this, and I've been talking about it a little bit, which is that the magic is taking on a physicality. Okay, so
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
example, this Morgan and I just kind of came to this last week. You know, let's why don't we do a Soulogy Fest, the second Soulogy Fest in Arkansas where we live, and you know it's a central location, and you know it's a very inexpensive, and so you know whatever. And so I did a show last Friday with David Maria. And, you know, when we started and we turned it on, I said, it's going to take a minute before people get in here. And I said to him, hey, by the way, we're going to be doing a Soulogy Fest in September in Arkansas. And I just wanted to tell you that before everybody gets in here. I haven't really, we're not going to announce it for a while. It's not official, but we're going to do it. So that was it. And we did the show. And then I think it was Tuesday, the following Tuesday or a couple days later, the weekend, I guess, our friend Suzanne Amara, who had just done a show a few days before, she's doing a live light language transmission on Facebook. And in the middle or some part of the transmission, my face pops up from that show. And it's the beginning, and I'm saying there's going to be a Soulogy Fest in Arkansas in September.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so I get this message from a friend of mine who went to the other Soulogy Fest, and she says, Todd, I was watching Susan Amara's thing, and your face popped up and said there's going to be a Soulogy Fest. Where is it? So I thought, well, maybe she was, you know, just watching it, and something happened, or a glitch, and it happened. But then I got a message from Susan Amara, and she writes me a note. She goes, Todd, this craziest thing happened. I'm doing my show, and you pop up. But this is what I'm talking about. And there's a level of that spontaneity and that present kind of, you know, what comes from that? What comes when the frequency is held of the spontaneity and you're not strategizing and structuring? And I think it's starting to take on a physicality. And then
Yeah.
to your point, just to kind of conclude it, this is where I just had this meeting, which just happened, right? And these things just happen. And it just kind of like goes, everything just kind of starts falling into place, and you're going, wow, this is crazy. You know, I was telling myself yesterday, this is going down now. I mean, this is really going down. So I just said to myself, get over the wow, and let's
Yeah.
get to work. You know, like this like the walk on the beach kind of frequency, it's here, right? And you know, to
Yeah.
be in amazement, because a lot of times we get hit with stuff, and we're in amazement, and it kind of puts us back on our heels, and kind of not paralyzes us, but kind of neutralizes us for a moment, and we're out of it. You know, we fall out of it because we're like, oh my God, you know, you're in awe. But yeah, I think this is what's happening.
Yeah, and you know, going back to what you were saying about working in the 3D, you know, there is to me as I watch your shows still clearly a different frequency that's happening in the 3D world from, you know, people who are, I use the expression more sensitive. I don't know if it's the right expression, but you know, for example, what's happening with Morgan, the things she posts, I really enjoy reading it, you know, because it's at the kind of cutting edge
Mm-hmm.
of what humanity is experiencing. But it's not really, I'm not really seeing it quite pan out in the 3D. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's a lot going on in terms of, you know, the expansion spiritually, that's happening at that closer to that edge that still isn't happening in
Right.
3D. What is happening in 3D is the heart expansion, very obvious to me, and I'll give you an example of that. Um, Last November, I had the opportunity to go and do a project with a bank,
Mm.
a very large bank, very, shall we say, influential in the business sector in Australia. And I was just doing a project on making sure that the bank was taking appropriate steps to assess the risk of the impacts, like when they give loans or they approve financial projects, the impacts on the environment and the impacts on society. We call it ESG in the 3D world: environmental, social, and governance. It's a big thing now.
Okay.
Just like investing for impact is a big thing now. It's a lot of work I do is around that. So that's people opening their hearts in the 3D world and saying we want to use money to clean up the environment and to reduce inequality and reduce forced labor and so on and so forth. So I was working in the bank to make sure that hugely complicated structure, but at every step that they're making key decisions to finance things, that they're also taking account of those things, right? Which is a good thing. And that's, I want to make that point about what's happening in the 3D world. A lot of that is happening now. Maybe it's not clearly guided by spirit. People aren't walking around saying, I feel connected to Gaia, but they are saying, I want to make an impact that's positive. So, okay, that was my project that I was helping with. And it was a good gig. I was excited to do it. I was invited to speak to a team, quite a senior team in the risk side of things at the bank, on the new purpose of the bank. Lots of corporates now have a new purpose that isn't about making money. They actually want to bring their people to work, and they say you now also have this broader purpose. It's a bit corporate-y, it's a bit kind of like, yeah, sure, really, you really mean it? But it's a move in the right direction. Okay,
Right.
so I don't want to be cynical about these things, or too cynical. So I was talking about this purpose, and I said to this quite senior team, I was quite upfront. I didn't go full kind of woo-woo, but I said, you're part of a transformation, right?
Don't worry, the day's coming when you will.
I said, we're part of a transformation. We're right in it. We are transforming how things are done on this planet. And so even very large businesses like yours is going to be about making a positive change. And people kind of got it. And I had people email me and say, yes, I want to talk to you about my personal purpose. I want to talk to you about how I don't really want to be working in kind of the credit function of the bank. I want to be working on these projects that make sure that the bank's helping to make a difference.
Right.
And this is not a one-off. People are switching on, and I'm seeing it at a massive scale. I can have conversations with people in any environment now, even if we're talking about the kind of big investment bank environments where people are talking about making an impact, investing in clean projects. So that I want to make that point that, at the 3D level, where people are realizing they want to do things differently, they're maybe still using the same old structures like a bank, and they're still using channels that, were created under an old kind of control and hierarchy mechanism, but they're still motivated unbelievably to do things differently.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because over here, and I'm sure over there too, the word woke has become a really big deal. So when you see the word woke all over mainstream media, I'm not saying that they're sincere. It's become, and I'm not saying they're not, but I'm just saying, I believe that the reason that it's become a buzzword and kind of become like like something that, sounds idealistic and is being utilized in the old paradigm of what's presented, is the reason that's happening is, and I think what you're talking about is kind of like a micro example, is because the heart is expanding and because people are waking up, and that pressure, that good pressure onto, the old paradigm is having an effect. So maybe one of the first characteristics of that is that, they take that term or that pressure, whatever, or that which they have to because it's there in those meetings because the impact's being felt, is now they have to kind of like, try to hijack it and utilize it for the type of purposes that they have before, which are ultimately, let's just say, ultimately projections of these heart's expansions of these individuals in these small meetings all the way up. So, yeah, I think that's good news because having a pretty long corporate career and understanding and being a part of it and being conditioned by it even. It's at the end of the day, it's numbers, it's, how it is. But
Yeah.
I believe that what you're saying is a really good sign and a great example of why is that term being thrown around? Why are things being presented as, oh, this is the idealistic way. If you're woke, you will feel this way. And of course, they're putting it behind teaching racism or non-racism, all that
Race
stuff.
theory and all of that
But
stuff.
yeah, but I mean, but at least you can see the evolution occurring in the projection from the hearts of people, and
It's a hijacking back, So the good intentions. This is what actually I did do a podcast on, new control structures last year, and it was about our good intentions being hijacked.
yeah,
So,
okay,
and that's why I was quite pissed off about what I was seeing. Whether it's climate change or diversity, there's a lot of hijacking. Climate change is what's being hijacked. It's like children growing up and wanting to live in a world that's pure and clean. They want a future, and there's a hijacking occurring of those good intentions, so that all we talk about is zero carbon. That's one example. Or diversity. All we talk about is, that we have to have certain numbers of people showing up that represent different parts of society, or that if you happen to be from one demographic, then you've got to feel like you're a perpetrator. You've got to feel guilty just for being born that way.
right.
If you're white male, you've got to feel guilty about that. And so there's all of this horrible manipulation around those concepts. But what you're saying is exactly right. The expansion is so pure and so immense that people are cutting through it. So woke has become an ironic term.
Right.
If you are too woke, that's not a good thing anymore in the corporate world, right? So, and that's just mainstream. Woke is now not a positive term. And what's happening is a backlash against what we call greenwashing. Don't just put out the fancy statement. Don't just make those promises that you're going to be cleaner and greener, etc. Back it up,
Right.
with actual action. And that, since I'm a lawyer, I'll mention it. That's actually become a major subject of litigation.
Really?
So companies are being sued for saying that they're clean and green, which is where the term greenwashing comes from. But they're not. They're just empty promises. So they're being sued to actually show that they are integrating those statements and those declarations and those targets into, for example, with this bank that I was working, that they're actually, whenever they're making decisions, they're actually considering those things. That's a major source of litigation now. And Australia is number 2 to America in terms of that kind of litigation.
That's encouraging. Because one of the things I've been thinking about, you see all this stuff out there, and you don't know what's information and what's disinformation, and there's a lot of stuff put out from, let's just say, from either side, if we got to define it that way. But one of the things that you see a lot of is, especially in Australia, man, what a hot spot. I mean, you see these videos of an attorney coming out of a government or courthouse saying, we just registered a case against the whoever for COVID or whoever for mandates or against one of the what do you call them, the PMs,
Yeah,
you
yeah, the
know,
premiers of the
the
states. Yeah,
premiers,
yeah,
and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is 6 months, 9 months, 12 months of seeing people coming out of the courtroom and they're having a hearing and now they're going to get them, and but nothing ever happens. And so
yeah.
my curiosity, because I have 100% faith in all of us. I have 100% faith. Uh, I just do, and so, but I like everybody else. I'm like sitting here on pins and needles, like when's the dam gonna break. But I'm just curious from your perspective because it's your profession. Is People talk about the deconstruction of obviously governments, religion, monetary, et cetera, et cetera. Where does the court system stand? And you know what I mean? Like, is that going to be
Um,
something that facilitates our expansion and embodiment into our societies? Or is it just another pillar in the matrix that's going to crumble? I mean, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I don't think there is, but I'm just curious, someone that's in the profession, what are your thoughts on that?
this is actually a question I ask myself constantly. Like, what parts of this legal system do we want to hang on to? And the court system is prime example. Um, I speak a lot, as you know, through my New Earth Lawyer podcast with other lawyers, and there are different views, Todd.
Yeah.
So, there are lawyers who work within the court system who feel that it can be reformed. I've spoken before, I think I might have spoken to you about it, but I've spoken on other platforms about restorative justice, which is this concept of you know, using using the existing court system, but making sure that the victim is heard and that the perpetrator actually, he addresses what the victim is saying and helps to um, repair the harm done. Community sometimes is involved as well. Um, so restorative justice is this concept of restoring the original circumstance, rehabilitating the victim, giving the victim a voice, and that people who practice in that kind of modality more, even though they are innovating, they're more likely to see the court system as something that we can reform. Then there are people who are more, far more kind of radical. And I interviewed a lady last couple of weeks ago, a civil rights lawyer in the UK, and she works in the system. She works in children's rights and family law, as I said, but mainly against the state. People who are having their children taken away, that kind of thing. And she says that her purpose on Earth is to get rid of the legal system. Like this, our job, she says, is to get rid of it and be self-governing.
Right.
So then you've got people like Maureen, is her name, Maureen Obi, um, who want to see the end of the legal system, and so you don't even have agreement in the
Yeah.
awakened legal community.
Well, I just
So what do I
wonder.
think? I think it will come to an end.
You do.
I,
Okay.
I think there are parts of it that can be reformed, but I think it's going to depend on the speed at which we want to move forward. If we want to move forward kind of step by step, then we'll reform the court system and reform this and reform that. But as a global consciousness, we might decide that that's not quick enough.
Yeah,
And
I have
so,
a feeling that's the way it's going to go. But in light of what you were talking about, or in regard to what you were talking about with your personal experience, like in the scenario with the bank thing,
hmm,
so where the opening of the heart that's bigger than all of us, that's kind of
yeah,
occurring anyway, even affecting people that are not woke or whatever you want to call it, or too woke or whatever. I would think that it would parallel itself in the legal system as well, in all things. Like the impact of the heart into the legal system, are there any signs? Like, for instance, if I look at, I like to watch different things to pick up these, or to look for these changes in the evolutionary process. One would be, and I've been tied to this just from personal experience, and because it's part of what I have to equalize in my life. And I'm like everything else, it just has levels, levels, levels. And that would be like police brutality, injustice in the system, and so on. And I think to myself, okay, because I love watching this one guy on I think it's on Facebook videos. I don't even know his name. And what he does is he'll take a traffic stop that escalates or whatever, and he'll cite the different legal statute and case law and so on and so on. And I think to myself, wow, this is great. And so many people, they're carrying their device and they're like, hey, you've got to articulate, reasonably articulate what your reason for your suspicion is. And so I think, well, how is that going to, go all the way down, extrapolate down to that occurrence between the, let's say the public representative and the supposed, violator or whatever. How's that going to happen? You got body cameras now, and like where it's going to actually affect, like where's the heart showing up there? And don't get me wrong, because I know that there's a lot of law enforcement out there that's got an open heart. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, when is the impact of the heart expansion going to affect, for instance, the thin blue line, where everyone gets protected because they're a cop and wear a badge? Now, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just giving some more, colors for us to paint from the palette. And it's interesting because I've not really ever had anyone tell me I'm in this corporate world or I'm in this particular facet of the, let's say, the matrix infrastructure, and I'm seeing it on a local level, and it's actually affecting, and so I would think that would have to be affecting the legal system, and even the compliance system as well.
Yeah, I don't do any court work. All of my work is corporate based and contract based. I don't do any criminal work, so I don't engage with law enforcement on behalf of clients. So I can't speak from personal experience or professional experience on that. I that's where that kind of individual against the power of the state. That is where the most kind of serious change needs to happen quickly.
Yeah. Well, you saw it too, though. You saw it in on a wider scale. I think you saw it in the like, for instance, in Canberra. In the different marches last year, which were quite impressive. I mean, because when you looked at the first marches in Australia, when the people started to push back, I mean, it was like cut and dry. It was like what was it? Occupy Wall Street. When they came out, man, they got slammed and it was over. And so that's how they started. But then they just kept coming back, and they kept coming back, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually there were so many people, there wasn't anything they could do. Now in Canada, you've got this guy who's like going, you're Nazis, you're racist, and you can't bring them gas or we're going to charge you. And, so I just see it like this giant pimple that's going to pop. if there isn't some type of modification and evolution, and something or someone's are facilitating it, then maybe it just gets blown up like we all have gotten blown up, and then you start to rebuild. I don't know.
Yeah, it could very well be. And once again, no clear. I don't have a clear view on that. I think it's useless for me to try and guess like one person, because it's the co-creation. The second by second co-creation. But I think with that law enforcement system and the pressure against it, it's one of those areas that is more likely to pop than others.
Yeah, I'm thinking
there's just too much pressure on it. Because it's connected to at least two other things, but probably a lot more. But the two things that come to my mind is the political system
Yeah.
that power being concentrated on
Yeah.
individuals, which really got brought to the fore with COVID, with emergency laws. As we saw that even with the very uh, limited extent of pure kind of representation in our parliaments, that got overridden because with emergency laws, even parliaments weren't doing their job. Individual politicians were taking over.
Right.
So that one other area that's very connected to the law enforcement is the reform of the political system, and then the other area is, of course, the media, right?
Yeah.
So to the extent that people actually realize what the I'm not going to use the word truth, but what the different agendas are
Yeah.
behind things.
Well, I think if you don't use it, I will. No, but
But I just don't know.
no, no, no,
Truth
no,
is one
no,
of those
no,
things
no.
that's
I
just
get, no,
that
I
you
get
don't
what
know
you're.
what it is.
I totally get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying because okay, so if you look at Julian Assange, okay,
Yeah,
which for all intents and purposes is basically, he's basically a media, newscaster or news person or whatever you want to call it.
yeah, a publisher, yeah,
So you have that sitting over here, which he's being, condemned and whatever and painted a certain way. And then over here, you have this, it really is. I mean, even people that are not woke or whatever we want to call it, asleep, starting to see the BS. Like, wait a minute,
yeah,
like not only are you holding up some really absurd kind of ideas, but you're also sending all these mixed signals. Like, what the hell's going on here? It's like, and maybe that's just the energy of what's happening imploding within itself or something. I watched this really interesting video yesterday, and it wasn't the content, although it was quite extraordinary. And I'll just run through it real quick. It was the energy behind it. And it was almost like this, my soul was going, look, watch this 7-minute video clip. It's DJ Vlad on YouTube.
mm-hmm.
And it was a comic by the name of Tommy Davidson that used to be in Living Color, which was a popular. Now,
Yeah,
this guy's about my age, about 60 years old. He's a black guy, and he was born in one of the poorest counties in America on or about 1960, right? And his mother, the story is his mother had 3 kids already, and he was sickly, and she put him in a trash can. And this white lady who was in the military, they were a married couple, both in the military, happened to be walking by the trash can and picked the baby up, took it to the hospital, revived it, and then adopted him. And he had 2 white step siblings. And so he goes on to tell the story about, because they were in Mississippi, which is the deep South, okay, ends up going to kind of a moderate climate in Colorado Springs, Colorado, because there's a military base there. So a little bit more progressive. And then ends up at 5 years old going to Washington, D.C. Now, he didn't know about black and white. He didn't know about any of this stuff. And he goes to Washington, D.C. about the time Martin Luther King got killed, and they're having riots and all this stuff, and he starts to learn about it. And so it was so extraordinary. And again, the energy, right? It was almost like reverse engineering reversed. And he says, he comes home to his mom, 5 years old, goes, why are they calling me cracker lover? And, why are they using the N word? And so she starts to explain it to him. He said, I didn't understand. He said, I grew up on the farm and a dog would have puppies, and one would be brown, one would be gray, one would be, and the same with the horses. And I thought, wow, now that is a power, like I said, kind of a reverse engineering reversed, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought maybe it's going to be something like that. Maybe it's going to be something like where, everybody feels it to the bones of what that is, because it was so alien to him. He didn't even know, it didn't make any, he didn't know what color was. And that's just one example. You could say it's some type of legal precedent or legal standard or, lots of other things. But I don't know why I even brought that up, and it's not relevant to law, but there was something in there that to me provided a clue or a path or a trajectory for these types of things, or how it might happen. how it might
That's
have.
actually brilliant. So you could see the pressure of that word truth, but let's say justice,
Just
another
yeah.
word that has different meanings to different people. But you could see that as we expand more and more, people in traditional positions of power, whether it's a prosecutor or a judge, may be pushed more and more towards that sense of justice has to happen here, and begin to create either begin to override precedent controversially, or begin to create novel ideas. It could happen that way. Um, and then the system may begin to break down as courts kind of refuse to um, uphold precedent in the way that they have, which would be completely revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example back to climate change, and this is controversial because it is climate change. But we had a court here that it was federal court, so it was at a federal level, single judge, and he decided that the environment minister had a duty to consider the future of the children when deciding whether to approve a coal mine,
Mm.
right? And that's may not sound like much to people. It may sound pretty obvious to people who are moved in that way regarding climate change. You might say, of course, the minister has that duty, but it imposed a whole kind of brand new duty of care onto a government minister, which had never existed before. And this single judge came up with this, right? And people made a big deal. I'm not climate change, as I said, is a controversial example, but you could see something happening like that, and more activism
Right.
in courts where
Right.
judges are saying, "No, hang on a minute, we're going to interpret the law this way, or that law no longer makes sense in this particular year of 2022," and start to become more and more and more just out there in terms of what we're used to legally speaking, and just breaks tradition, breaks it down more and more and more and more. And then one judge encourages another. That case I'm talking about went on appeal, and then a full bench, which is like when you appeal, it goes to more than one judge. So
Mm-hmm.
3 judges overturned that and said that that judge got it wrong.
Wow.
So they returned back to tradition. But you could see, as there's more and more of more and more change happening in people's hearts and their minds, that a court may begin to say, "Oh, no, that judge got it right," or listen to the lawyer who's speaking from the heart, and just rather than chip away at it, just begin to cut down whole swathes of the tradition that's holding us back in the law. That could be one way it happens.
Yeah. I think now that I'm talking to you and reflecting, I mean, really, what if it is as within without, and we've all been splintered to be rebuilt? Why would it be any different for any of these other issues? There's another example. There was a guy. I'm a old basketball player, and there was a guy in the '90s in the NBA. There was an extraordinary talent. He had Tourette syndrome. His name was Chris Jackson. He changed his name. He became a Muslim. Very, very distinguished, noble guy. I mean, this guy was just a really good guy. And he wouldn't stand for the national anthem. And they ended up suspending him and eliminated his paycheck. And eventually they ran him out. And I happened to catch a video of the documentation of that during that time. And it was quite eye-opening, because then I went, well, wait a minute. Didn't we just go through this with Kaepernick? And then there was another one, almost like what happened with the tennis player in Australia.
Oh yeah, Novak Djokovic.
Or the basketball player in New York City, Kyrie Irving, who can't play his home games. And I thought, wait a minute, nothing's actually changed. And I look at these organizations, even though they're sports oriented, like the NFL in the NBA that have protection. They don't pay taxes, just like the church, right? And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. You know, it doesn't look like it's moved at all, especially if you take the propaganda out. It's really the same old thing. It just looks a little bit different because of the way it's painted. But yeah, maybe it's just going to all splinter.
Yeah,
You know?
and it would be pressure from without and from within, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
probably. So it's outside pressure, it's maybe um, people having their voices heard, like the truckers in Canberra and Toronto,
Yeah.
Ottawa. Um, and and maybe it's going to be within, individuals sitting on the bench suddenly going, no, no, this is
See,
just not right. It doesn't matter
what
what the
I'm
law says.
wondering. See, that's what I've always wondered because, okay, so you're right there in the hot spot, or what was the hot spot, because you don't hear a lot about Melbourne like you did, and so it's kind of like a perfect example. You have this really obstinate stance, then you have this pushback from the groundswell, the groundswell of the people, and then you start to get a little bit given back, a little bit given back, almost like a Stockholm syndrome type of
Yes. Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
Although I don't,
Jordan Peterson has a really good, the way he describes it. Jordan Peterson says it's like you'll encroach and you push back,
yeah,
and then the person encroaches more, and you push back one step,
yeah,
and so on. Suddenly you find yourself here, right?
right.
When you started here.
Right. It's almost like, again, like a reverse kind of thing. So I looked at the Ottawa thing or even
Yeah.
the Canberra thing, and I go, okay, this is so cool, right? Like, this is so cool. What's the impact going to be? And I look around for evidence of wholesale change, and you don't see it. And how,
Um,
and the movements kind of lost steam in terms of I guess the boots on the ground participation. Not that it's not there, but and I'm going, okay, so what's gonna happen there? I mean, what's it gonna take? I don't know.
I
It's
don't know
an
either.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was watching both things,
Mm,
with great interest,
mm,
and listening to commentators also saying, this is it. Like, you all have to participate and stand up, etc., because it's now or never kind of thing, which I didn't didn't really didn't really resonate with me. That it has to be this or else. It's the last stand. I don't think so. But I was wondering whether it would be the point at which the pimple pops, and it
yeah.
wasn't, right. So there's
Mm.
obviously
I know.
more that needs to happen.
It was slammed, really, if you
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah,
And yeah, and see, here's another thing I look at too, and again, I think you have a really good perspective or vantage point. I look at it, I go, wait a minute, because both my parents were civil servants, lifetime civil servants. My stepfather was in the CIA for 25 years. I mean, you know, and they're people. At the end of the day, they're people, right? I mean,
yeah.
just because somebody has this label or that, they're just people. And I wonder to myself, I wonder how many people, what is the percentile or the demographical makeup, be it idealistically inclined or whatever the case is. It can't be much different than any other group. There's got to be people getting downloads that work in the White House. There's got to be judges getting visitations that sit on a bench. I mean, it's interesting. It's because it can't be like, oh, they're all just cardboard cutouts and they don't have a mind, or they operate off a beehive intelligence or a singular intelligence that's driven by some. I mean, I don't know. Anything's possible, but still, if the soul is embodied in us, which I fully believe it is, and one thing we all know is once it starts nudging you, you can't say no to it. It's gonna.
Yeah, I think that is maybe the key, right? What was occurring to me is the programming, right? The
Mm,
programming within these organizations is really strong. And
mm-hmm,
you had a corporate career.
yeah,
I've been in corporate law, large law firms. You it became quite sophisticated. And we were talking about that woke culture.
Mm-hmm.
The woke messages is part of the sophistication of the programming.
Yeah.
So that you've gone from, we evolved, the corporate world evolved from, you're here to make money for the man, to, oh, we care about you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make sure you're looked after. You're going to have all of these benefits and perks, and we care about your career progression.
Right.
And we care about everybody. So we're going to have a diversity committee. So all of that dressed up the programming, or was part of the sophistication of the programming. But the programming is getting weaker.
Yeah.
Whether you want to call it the end of the matrix or the turning off of the matrix, or whether it's an expansion of people's individual hearts and minds. It's probably both, and much more besides. Energies coming in. So the programming within those organizations is weaker, and even to the point where the dressing up
I
with the
agree.
wokeness
I agree.
is people are seeing beyond it, or
Yeah.
seeing the truth of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think even if you've been inculcated in it, and you've reached kind of a position of power, if you're not someone who's been very, very heavily targeted for programming individually, if you're just part of kind of the collective programming, and you're getting your souls talking to you, yeah, I could see it happening on a significant scale.
Well, I look at my own situation, in my career, and I ended up getting out, and then I went into consulting. But I guess my heart has always been open, and I know.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not comparing myself to anyone, but there were just certain things I would never do. Ethically, morally, people offered me money. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that went on. But I was able to sustain myself because I was either the top or one of the top performers, right? But even with that, because I wouldn't allow people to be mistreated, I eventually got terminated. Now, there were so many different dynamics involved around what we're talking to. First and foremost, you got somebody who's married and got 4 kids in the house, and even though he's making 6 figures, really living paycheck to paycheck basically, and doesn't really have a choice, and then it's taken away. And then I had no savings, and I had substantial legal precedent. I mean, I had 2 civil rights violations. I had insider trading. I had 6 different things. I took it to a lawyer. I don't have any money. He said, "Oh, this is slam dunk, but it's going to take years." And I'm like, I don't have years. And I ended up settling for like $36,000. And of course, the attorney took a third, and and that was just the way it went. But what I'm saying is that wasn't allowed to prosper in an organization that was being presented with a code of ethics, with a system of righteousness, and ethical alignment, moral alignment. It really wasn't there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I can't understand that if somebody let's say in a structure, in an organization, in an institution, I wasn't the only one. Now, I might have been the only one, or one of the only ones that spoke up, but there's got to be, I would think, a leader who's at the top, who would at some point have, because I'm sure many of them think about it. And let's just say like a JFK personality, maybe something like that. That would do it, that would have the courage to do it, like one of these premiers, or a president, or a governor, or I don't know. But you would think somebody would at one day just jump up and go, "Hey, let me tell you something. I got visited by the Arcturians, the dragons came in, or whatever, Jesus came in or whatever, and here's what's going on, here's what I know. And because I'm a soul, I'm going to say it, because you can't hurt me." Something like that. There's got to be people that are touched by the soul. I would think, unless the apparatus is so huge that and like you said, the conditioning is so huge that they don't even think about it. I can't fathom that. I can't see how this open-hearted mother goddess energy that you outlined so well in that example with the bank thing isn't impacting, even because if it's impacting everybody on the earth, they're part of the everybody, right? So
Yeah, it actually reminds me, when you're talking about that, it reminds me of the president of a republic. I mean, it was still part of the Russian Federation, but it was a republic called Kalmykia years ago. I think this was in the 90s. And he was not only the president of this republic, but he was president of the International Chess Federation. And this is why I had an interest, because I happen to play chess. And his name was Kurzan Ilumzhinov. And Kurzan said that he was visited by aliens.
really,
Yeah. And this was either early 2000s or 90s, but he was a very powerful figure, and he'd made a lot of money, I think, through exporting caviar and importing luxury goods. So he was one of these kind of what's the word for it? Oligarchs at an early stage after the Russian Federation came into being and the Soviet Union broke down. Anyway, he actually went public, and he said, I was visited by aliens, and they took me aboard a spaceship, and they told me all of these things. And one of the things they actually also told me was that chess is a game that came from outer space, which is quite, I'm not sure what to make of it as a chess player. Quite a statement. But I think he continued to be president for a long time of that republic, and he actually there was all sorts of stories about whether he was corrupt or not. And I think he was protected a little bit because he was within Russia, and Russian media has been a lot more open to these sorts of stories than the Western media has been.
right.
But there was a bit of kind of giggles about it, about the fact that he came out with saying, and part of his message was that we need to be kinder to each other, I think, and we need to be fair to each other. It makes me think of that. If someone like that came out now, say an Australian premier, and said that, what would we say about him or her? Would we? Yeah, what would be the reaction? Are we at a point in time now where we're ready?
Well, I think it's the individual, because if you think about it, what you end up having is let's just say the opposite force coming in. First of all, they've got to be very substantial in terms of charisma and personality, and even power, financial and otherwise. Really, financial is key. And they have to really. Donald Trump's a perfect example.
Well, I think Elon Musk is another example.
Elon Musk is he's intriguing, because on one hand he says a lot of really interesting things. On the other hand, is he controlled? I don't know. It's a very interesting one. But like, there's a guy in Australia that has a lot of money. I don't know his name, and he's kind of been like an antagonist to and these people. They call him like the Australian Donald Trump guy, right? But my point is, I don't. But my point is that if you have somebody who's so charged and fighting the establishment, that doesn't seem to work either. Now you have someone like say a JFK, who was kind of like doing it, but still like doing it within the structure itself, didn't work. To me, it would seem like it would have to be somebody like a Gandhi. I think someone that would probably be like either a female or a very strong feminine presence in a male body, who would come in with that balance and that same energy that you're talking about, that heart expansion that's affecting the people and therefore the institutions themselves. Somebody who would come in and actually bring this frequency of, that you can't really argue with, that space between everything, right? I don't know. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but I don't see how somebody who's going to be supercharged against the establishment it's going to make it happen. It's no different than the way it works in our lives. If we approach anything, like people talk about waking up and, and the importance, and there is importance of the revealing and the disclosure, and, what 9/11 did to many people is when they came to their, but if you take that stance where you're too supercharged, it just doesn't, I haven't seen any evidence, and I'm a history buff, and I'm a chess player too, by the way. I was a city champ twice when I was in my teens. There's just something, it just doesn't ever seem to pan out. So what's the other avenue? Well, you look at MLK, you look at a Gandhi, you look at a Jesus, you look at that type of personality, and that's not even a full blown success, so to speak. So I don't know. It's just.
I think it's got to be because we're beyond the leader follower dynamic and energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have to be a group effort. And not everybody at the same time, obviously, because we're all on different paths. But that whole idea of, Donald Trump, one of the issues with Donald Trump, and again, it's very murky as to
Mm-hmm.
what he really was and what he really knew. One of the issues that kept coming up about him was people relying on the whole savior complex, that someone else is going to save him. So I think it's going to be a collective effort. So if you think about whether it's a politician now who suddenly decides that now's the time that they're going to get moving, it's going to be, there'll be the person in an Australian state, and then there'll be a person in a Canadian province, and so on. Someone in government, someone in law, someone in business. More and more and more voices is probably how I see it happening. And that's why I think Elon Musk is really interesting, because again, like Donald Trump, it's very murky, as you said, as to what is really happening there.
It is.
But he does tweet some things that are super interesting.
He does.
He does. When he starts talking about the Fermi paradox, which is the paradox as to, why aren't aliens visiting us?
I hadn't heard that.
If we live in this vast universe,
yeah.
Why aren't people showing up? Which comes from a scientist called Fermi, who actually, in a chat with a couple of other famous scientists, coined it. He said, it just does not make sense, on any level of scientific approach. That we aren't seeing extraterrestrial life.
I agree, and it's interesting because I like to read the MSM because I like to see what they're trying to telegraph, like where they're trying, and it's interesting because I would say especially this year, you're seeing like these things that they're putting out there that kind of contradict what they were putting out before. Almost like they're taking the side of what was opposing it and starting to now kind of like, just feather it into, kind of quietly, subtly. And I'm going, wow, this is crazy. This is kind of weird, like they're planting the seeds. Like even with Musk, here you have no space travel for all these years, and there's all these theories and hypotheses and all that. And then all of a sudden you've got the public sector leading the charge going into pretty much, I know India just launched or is getting ready to do some pretty cool stuff, but like and now you're going, well, wait a minute, and what are they doing it with? Government money. Tesla is a lot of, so it's a really crazy mix because there's a lot of there's a lot of just crazy divergent energy in that field, and then it makes me think of the macro to the micro, like, wow, that's what happens to us before we melt down. and
so that's why I was saying it's like a washing machine of stuff, right? Because you got to add the galactic disclosure into that. And if you just take one slice of the whole UFO phenomena and so on over the last decades, it's in itself a complete chaotic mess trying to understand it.
It is.
Agendas and reasons for doing things and so-called truth. but it's now being added into this mix. And you've been talking about this for years. You know, you bring together the different elements of the awakening community, the spiritual, and
Right.
then the UFO disclosure and the conspiracy. We have all kind of congealed together in this massive
It's beginning to, yeah.
chaotic bunch. And so I do follow a lot of that. You know, I'm very interested in Dr. Michael Salla. You know, he's an Australian, was living in Hawaii. I think he's still living there. I just like his approach
Yeah.
because he continues to be quite academic about it, right? Even
Yeah.
though he'll tap into some really way out stuff, but he'll present it in a way that is still academic and logical. So I like him. Take it all with a grain of salt, of course,
Yeah.
of course. But you know, from what he's saying, there is a galactic element to all of this change, and you know, there could be many different reasons for Michael Salla coming out with what he is coming out with, which is that that we are being assisted galactically.
Right.
One thing could be that, yep, okay, it's the truth that's actually happening. Another could be that he's being misled
Right.
and that there is a psyops happening. But whatever it is, you know, that there is something to that whole side of the story. You know, that there is we're going to have to add the opening up to extraterrestrials one way or another as part of the whole confusing moving forward.
It is. It's crazy. It really is.
It's totally crazy.
Let me ask you. I want to ask you one more thing before.
Yeah.
I often. I'm like. I think we think a lot alike. Like, because I like to take in a lot of information, and then kind of sit, and put it back out, spit it
Yeah.
back out, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like your field of belief, therefore reality is here. You take in a bunch of information, and the field of your consciousness gets bigger, and from a human perspective or a human reality, you're just replacing a bigger belief system, a smaller belief system with a bigger one, and it just keeps going. And then I go, wow, this is just too effing confusing to me. I just can't deal with this. I am soul, and maybe this is a thought experiment. Maybe we are that, and we went, let's go play, and let's apply to the physicality, which, I mean, there's a lot of truth to this in terms of what our life is, because we know that we do create, and there's something to be said that we've been unconscious creators, whether we were conditioned or controlled or whatever, but now we're becoming conscious, and we're starting to see many, like the lady you're talking about, the last show you watched with Marita. I mean, that's a fucking miracle. Like, that's these stories, and they're all over the world. And maybe that's the whole dog chasing its tail thing, right? And maybe that's why the snake's eating itself and all the ancient religions, But if that's the case, and I'm, let's say I'm right in my own right, and it is a thought experiment, then how far or how close am I to removing the belief systems created by the thoughts that have a physicalization that, as an example, keep me from having dinner with Morgan Lee tonight, in Australia, right? Like, it feels like it feels to me like the veil it's like it's right there, right? It's just like, and all that stuff is just a story and goes away. I don't know, but I don't know. Anyway, that was kind of a question, really. Is it a thought experiment?
Is it, you mean an individual thought experiment?
No, I mean,
that
like,
you,
as a group, as a
collective
whole.
thought experiment?
Like, we came in here and said, let's try this and see how far we can drive ourselves crazy or something. I don't know, but because I really feel I really feel like that there's an intangible, invisible kind of thing going on, that no matter if you're the president, the Pope, Todd, Geraldine, whoever, it's applicable to all of us. Like, we all
Yeah.
have, you know what I mean? Like, it's something that's bigger than us, that is like this weird kind of that maybe that's what this whole thing is or where it's going, that's been prophesized all these years. But regardless, it feels like there's a big bubble that's bursting now.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Matteo Di Stefano a
Hmm.
lot, and I really like his stuff. I watched one thing that he did, which was on the whole multidimensional reality, right? I mean, we're sitting here in the third dimension, um, and we're connected to all aspects of ourselves in different other dimensions, right? And we're all supposed to have made this big leap on the 22nd of February. Um, and leading up to that leap, we were getting messages from other parts of ourselves in different dimensions, all getting ready for whatever was the next expansion that was supposed to occur dimensionally, multidimensionally. And he tells this funny story of like everybody's ready, you know. Fifth dimension's ready, seventh dimension's ready, eighth dimension's ready, and it's like third dimension, are you ready? And we're just like down here with no idea. We're like, oh, I had this funny dream where someone came from the fifth dimension and they were telling me to get ready. What the heck does that mean? All right, so we're getting this messaging through a very thick, through a veil, and as you said, I believe it's getting thinner. But they kind of, all of this messaging is to prepare us, and the messaging is coming as
Hmm.
different ideas, different, and we've seen them in the spiritual community, all of these different channelings and
Hmm.
new age religions and Ashtar Command or whoever coming and telling us these things. But it's all part of the preparation of moving up. Um, and then once we do move up, a lot of all of those stories are going to fall away
Yeah,
because we've done what we came here to do, which was to at this particular portal in time and space, which is what Matteo talks about a lot. That we had that window to do it. We did it. So then we're going to do it, and hopefully we have, or we are in the process of.
well, it makes
And then
sense.
all of that,
Well,
narrative and
yeah, because
just
it's
isn't
like
useful
have you
anymore.
ever had anything in your life that by just organic, natural evolution process, immaturity, whatever you want to call it, where from one day to the next something becomes a moot point. It just becomes
Yeah,
moot. And
yeah,
and from a you would think, because like we do shadow work and we do zero pointing, and it's kind of like graduated in terms of the dissipation of it. But like there are points in our life where all of a sudden what we thought, not only we realize, oh, that's not even that wasn't what I thought it was. Okay. And then everything associated with it becomes moot,
yeah.
and it has no threat or has no influence on you anymore. And to think that something like that could happen, to an individual, why couldn't it happen to a world? Like,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, the whole Donald Trump thing,
mm,
is an example of it to me, where it was all going to be, around January last year, right? It was
mm,
all going to burst then, and it didn't.
right,
And then it morphed into a series of different stories coming out of, yes,
right.
he really is still the president. He's really, at some airbase somewhere planning it with the military, or,
Hmm.
or, or whatever. Michael Flynn is this or that, so on and so forth. We've got all the proof
JFK
of the
Jr.
election fraud.
JFK
Yeah,
Jr.
okay,
is coming
Junior.
back.
Just all of these stories that you
I
can't
know.
deal with it, right? You
I
got to a
know.
point where it was just, I don't want to hear anymore. And we moved on from it.
True. That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I love talking to you. It's interesting.
Yeah,
It's
likewise.
different because
I knew this was going to be fun,
yeah.
even though I didn't know it
I
was
didn't
going to
realize
turn.
it. I didn't realize we just ran into almost an hour and a half. That's cool. I didn't mean to keep you
Yeah,
so long. Well, listen,
that's
I really appreciate you coming in, and I enjoyed it, and I really wish you the best always, and all blessings to you and your little soulmate there. Uh, and
yes.
I look
God, I miss
forward
him.
to collaborating with you again, in the future.
Okay. Thank you. And please, yeah, to you and Morgan, thank you so much. And the stuff that you both put out, it's just so enlightening and just so educational. I love it.
That's
Please
good to
don't.
hear.
I know you're not gonna stop.
I
But
can't
please don't.
compete with her, but that's good to hear.
This stuff is amazing.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
take care. We'll
Bye.
see y'all later. Thank you so much.